Hey, what's going on, guys? Pete here with mixbetternow.com and learningtomix.com, and I am very, very happy to be bringing you today part 4 of mixing drums from scratch. Know we've had a little bit of a gap in between part 3 and right now, but better late than never. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. All right, back in the saddle here. Guys, I just want to say sorry that there's been like a little bit of a gap in between part 3 and part 4. I think it's been about like 4 weeks or something like that. But things have just been crazy, busy this summer. I was down in Nashville for a while last month, went to NAMM, was doing some work in some studios and stuff like that. There's just been a lot of projects up. So I'm always trying to throw free content up, you know, and while I haven't been able to get part 4 up sooner, I always try and get stuff up there for you. So apologies for that. So anyway, listen, part 4, we're going to be talking about using drum samples now. I figured it's about that time. It's about that, you know, that part of my process where I'll start to bring those sorts of things in. And I figured, you know, today would be a good time to start talking about that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to focus on the kick and the snare samples. I'm going to show you how I set that up and basically what my process is. So let's take a listen to where the drums are at right now. I'm just going to solo the entire drum group. And in part 3, we basically focused on doing some EQing and compression, a little gating, sweetening to the kick and the snare buses. Okay, that's an important thing for me. And then we also took a look at parallel compression, which is another very, very important thing. Okay, so parallel on the kick and the snare. As you guys can see, right, PK&S, that stands for parallel kick and snare, and then parallel drum compression, pretty much on everything else. I've got a snare verb set up that's just kind of hanging out there, and a drum verb effects send. You know, we may or may not put something on there. I like using some natural things like Ocean Way or maybe some other room sounds. So we're going to also use samples to gain some of the acoustic spatial imaging that we can get from, you know, using things like chamber mics, room mics, overhead mics, things like that. So anyway, let's take a listen to the drums. We could see where they're at. Let's just quickly blend everything else in. Just so you guys remember, nothing else is mixed here. Okay, some percussion, bass, acoustic guitars, electric guitars, keys, synths, and vocals. The only thing that is in the virtual mix rack here on all the other tracks is I'm just using the VCC right now, and I always have a trim tool up here just in case I need to gain something down or up. And that's the only thing that's in here right now. Okay, so here's what the drums sound like. And if I bring everything else in, this is where the balance is right now of the entire mix.
We bent and we tried till the past came around. Beating hearts in different rhythm makes such a terrible sound. We don't know a thing, and we've been here waiting for such a long time, and I can't help.
So as you guys can hear, right, I mean, it's pretty much faders up with everything except the drums so far. We've just got a little bass happening. Acoustic guitars. Okay, so you guys get the idea, right? Let's take a look now. Let's go to the arrange window. And I have packed all the major instrument groups into some folders here. So let's drop down the drums. Now, the reason I want to do this is because I'm going to show you basically my technique to setting up a kick sample track and a snare sample track, and it's pretty easy. Now, there's a bunch of different ways we can do this, right? I'm just showing you my way. Everything that I'm talking about is the way that I like to work, and hopefully you guys can take this on board and give it a try and see if it's something that you like. Okay, we've got the kicks here, kick in and kick out, going to the kicks bus. We've got the snare top and the snare bottom going to the snare bus. Maybe this will be easier to see in the mixer. Right, kick in, kick out to the kicks, snare top and bottom to the snares. The toms are going to a toms bus. Everything else comes to the overhead room. And then we've got everything coming to the drum bus. All of this stuff filters down into my drum level. And basically this drum level is just it's kind of like a VCA. I don't put any processing on it really. I have everything coming to here, so that way we have one fader. If I want more drums, I just go whoop, push the fader up. If I want less drums, I can bring it down. Okay, just very easy. So the way that I like to do this is I will duplicate one of the kick and one of the snare tracks to get my sample tracks, okay? So all I'm gonna do, typically I'll use the kick in and the snare top, just because they're the most predominant tracks, okay, of the two. You're gonna get probably the biggest waveforms, the most consistent waveforms from the kick in and from the snare top. Sometimes you might get it from the kick out, but just about every time on the snare, you're gonna want to use the snare top. I really never use the snare bottom for it. So all I'm gonna do is just duplicate. Okay, right click on here. I'm gonna duplicate track. I'm gonna do the whole thing. I'm just gonna drop it down here at the bottom, and I'm just gonna change the color on this a little bit. We'll make this guy a little pink. Now, I just do this so that when I'm looking at it and I'm flying around mixing, I can just quickly identify that, and I could go, you know what, that's my sample track right there. So I'm gonna call this kick trig. And we're gonna do the same thing here to the snare. We're gonna right click, duplicate complete, drop her down, change the color. And you guessed it, snare trig. Okay, so I'm gonna leave that there for now in the arrange window. We're gonna come back here to the mixer. Now, one thing I wanna do is we're gonna have to do a little bit of routing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add another bus here, and I'm gonna basically put it in between. It doesn't really matter where you put it, but I usually just set up a bus, and I'll bring this guy over here. Now I'm just gonna call this, samples. And this is an important concept here, okay? So the reason that I'm doing this, I'm gonna send this to samples and snare trigger to samples. So I know you're thinking right now, hey Pete, why aren't you sending the kick trigger track to the kicks bus, and why aren't you sending the snare trigger track to the snares bus? And the reason that I am not doing that is because check out what I've done, or what we've done thus far to the kick bus, right? We've got our FabFilter gate on it, and we have our SSL channel on here, so we're doing some EQ and compression. Now, look, here's the thing about samples that a lot of people don't think about, or maybe some people don't realize, is that a lot of samples are already EQ'd and they're already compressed, so like they're already processed. So here's what happens, right? If I take a sample and send it to an already EQ'd and an already compressed track, it's gonna drastically change the sound of that sample. I'll show you what it sounds like when we actually get the samples loaded up. But what I do is by sending these samples over here to my sample bus, which then will be sent to the drum level or the drum VCA, what this ensures for me is that it's gonna come here to my master drum VCA, and it's not gonna go through multiple rounds of processing, right? Because my kick and snare buses come here to the drum bus, and what are we doing on the drum bus? More EQ, right? More EQ and more compression. So those are two stages of EQ and compression that I don't want my samples to go through. All right, so let's hop back over to the arrange window. Now I'm gonna open the inspector just so we don't have to hop back over here. Let's go to the kick trigger track. we can start here. Doesn't really matter, 6 to 1. I'm just gonna take a look at what I have in the VMR. So I had gained down the original kick a little bit. I had the VCC on here, but I'm gonna turn this off for now because I want trigger to be the first thing on the track. So we're gonna go to the drop down. We will grab trigger, and I'm gonna put this right up top here, okay? So this isn't really gonna be a tutorial on how to use trigger. I might do another one of those. Actually, little spilling of the beans. I've been doing some work with Slate Digital and with Slate Drums recently. Not a huge secret or anything like that, but I just finished doing a sort of a trigger drum sample masterclass for Slate Digital, which will be coming out very soon. You're going to be able to check all that stuff out over at Slate Digital and StevenSlateDrums.com. Anyway, so, you know, again, this isn't a how to use trigger thing. This is just a how to use samples in conjunction with your drums. So, you know, trigger, we're going to open it here. Okay, all default. I'm going to go to my browser. Now here's sort of where it gets a little subjective, is we're going to have to figure out which samples we want to use, because, you know, there's a lot of different sounding samples out there, right? So depending on what sort of fits with, you know, sort of how the acoustic drums sound already, I like to try and get samples that, what's the word? That flatter the drum tone, right? Because I don't like for example, I'm not going to grab a kick drum sound right here that's going to have like massive amounts of attack on it, like a metal kick, right? Where it's just, you know, it's not going to be something like that. I'm probably going to go for, you know, a 22 or a 20-inch kick, you know, something that's just kind of got some pop rock, you know, just more of like an indie rock kind of flavor to it, right? It's got to match the tonality, and it's got to match the vibe of whatever session you're working in. All right, so now let's just make sure that we've got everything working here. I'm going to turn trigger off for a minute just so we can make sure we're hearing this. Now I turned the mix knob right now to 0%. And the reason I've done this is just so that I can hear the initial kick. 0% on here indicates that you are hearing 0% of the sample. 100% on the mix knob is 100% of the sample. So anywhere in between would be a blending of the two. I may or may not use the gate on here. I think the gate function is incredible, especially if you're blending some of the original acoustic, you know, kick in, where there's, for example, in the kick mic, you're hearing snare in the kick mic. But I like to use 100% of the sample. So for me, it's really all about just finding the sample now. So we're gonna go into our browser menu. This is where I keep some of my my samples, and we're gonna look for something that just sort of works with this. So I'm a big fan of the CLA kicks. These are some expansion packs that you can get over at StevenSlateDrums.com that I love. The Blackbird pack is amazing. The CLA pack is amazing. I use those two a lot. And of course, Trigger 2 Platinum comes with a whole bunch of really great sounds. Another company that I'm a massive fan of their samples is That Sound. IWantThatSound.com. They're fantastic. So I would say, like, I predominantly use those two things, you know, those two companies a whole lot. The Slate Drums and That Sound. So let's go to the CLA kicks are pretty awesome, and they have some really cool presets. So we're just gonna try and fly through this, and I'm just doing this to show you how I dialed these things in. It's not so much like this needs to be etched in stone and, you know, it's unchangeable and things like that. But let's just open a DW 22-inch. I believe that the HB stands for heavy beater or hard beater, and the SB is soft. So we have a bunch of different samples comprised in one group. Now we've got two spot mics on the kick. Okay, so there's a kick in, a kick out. I'm sorry, there's three. There's a kick sub. There's two rooms. There's an overhead, and then there's an effects here. So as long as you have the audition button here on the left, you're good. You can just click on it. Right, and then and you could hear all of the different samples there. Now the idea here is make sure that if you're using these packs, be it be it the CLA pack or the Blackbird pack, or if you're using, say you come down here to the trigger 2 kicks, make sure that you bring all the samples in. So for example, here's kick 1. But what's important is that there's a chamber mic and there's a room mic in here. And the concept behind it is that when you come to the trigger menu, you can blend it in with the faders on the mixers here, right? So let's just try this 22-inch kick. I'm going to start with the kick in. I like to line it up in a similar way that I would do it in my session. Kick in, kick out. We'll do the sub. We'll go overheads. We'll do room A, room B, and then we'll go effects. So we're gonna listen to this, see how it sounds. Now I'm gonna have to dial in the, for example, if I want more kick in and less of the sub and more of room A and less of room B, you can just move it on the faders. It's kind of like having a little mini DAW inside of your DAW, right? So let's take a listen, and we're gonna dial in our sensitivity, our retrigger, and our detail. These are kind of like the three main controls to sort of get your triggering correct. First thing I'm going to do is increase the volume here. We want maximum waveform, so you want to see it at the top and the bottom of the window. Now you hear that flamming that's going on. Well, those aren't multiple kicks. What's happening is that the retrigger is set so fast that it's looking at it and it's basically saying, it's thinking that it's more than one hit. So a very easy way to clean that up, to make it trigger correctly, is to just increase the retrigger time. Right, so up at 67 milliseconds sounds great. At 15, where it defaulted to, you really get some flaming. So I just bring this up here, and let's make sure our detail is good. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that these two lines are far enough out so that there's nothing false triggering the kick, like the snare drum inside the from the bleed inside of the microphone. Okay. So far it sounds good, but it's impossible to know what it sounds like unless you listen to it in the conjunction with everything else. So let's just leave that there right now. So we've got trigger set up here on our kick trigger track. I don't know if that's the sample set that we're going to use, but it's there. Let's come over here to the snare. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to turn the VMR off. We're going to grab trigger 2. Put this guy up here, set it to 0. And let's just go ahead and pull open a sample. Let's see what's up with that sound. Let's find the... Let's see what's in the Paul Mayberry here. We'll grab some snares. Let's try Smack Beauty. So, it's just a different approach, I guess, that different companies use. So like here, under snare sounds, we've got big, clean, dry, natural, and rooms only. So what that does is it just gives us a very similarly to in the CLA that we just saw, or in the trigger library, it gives us different options. You can get a dry snare sound. You can get a room snare sound and blend these all together. So I usually go to like natural here and I'll just audition it. Got to go back and switch this to the sample 100%. Kind of digging the snare sound already. Let's try H1. Let's see what the big sounds like. That sounds pretty sweet. We'll throw a big in there. We'll put a clean in. Put a dry in. Now the reason I put all these in is because we're going to blend them. we might only use one or two, and we can mute the rest or we can delete the rest. So let's get a room. That's cool. Okay, let me just turn this down a little bit so I don't blast you guys out. Now again, we want the waveform to be maxed on the screen, which it is. We'll increase the detail so we don't have any false triggering. So I think that there is a roll. So what we need to do is make sure that if there's, some ghost notes in there, or if there's like a little fill or something that we're capturing all that. I know there's like a little fill going in before here. So if I can hear that and it's triggering properly, then I know we're good. Right there. I'm going to turn the volume up a little bit more. Okay, cool. So this is 100% wet now, and what I meant before when I was showing you the blending of the two is if you wanted to, let's say you had one snare track and you wanted to blend this in with the one snare track on there, you could totally do that. You don't have to duplicate it. This is just what I like to do. So if, for example, if you're one of those people that likes to blend the two like that, you can just pull this back. And you can get a blend of the original acoustic snare with this snare. So, like I said, there's always a dozen different ways to do things, in mixing, in audio. So let's just try those. Now, I want to bring in the rest of the kit just so we could hear what everything's doing. If I can find the VCA, there we go. Let's just take a listen. These are probably going to be loud and they might not sound correct, but we're going to have to tweak and dial these in. All right, so the way that I start this process is clearly we have trigger locked and loaded on both tracks. We've got our routing correct, which the kick and the snare trigger are coming to our samples track. The samples is then coming over here to the drum level. Yeah. So what I want to do now is just massage these in. I want to see how they sound in conjunction with everything else, and then we need to start figuring out, okay, is this a sound that I can work with? Do I need to readjust the faders inside of the trigger interface? Stuff like that. Now, as you start with one at a time, I don't want to overwhelm myself, so I'm pulling up the kick, and the first thing that I'm hearing is I'm just hearing too much room in here. Like I said, I don't know if this is necessarily like the right sample for this song. It's a process going through, maybe knowing your sample library, things like that are very important, okay? Like a lot of mixers have go-to samples that they will use for certain genres. Andy Wallace, for example, like one of my favorite engineers, records Andy Wallace has done, Nirvana Nevermind. I mean, it's insane, but Rage Against the Machine, right? Evil Empire. On and on and on and on. But I remember being a kid and hearing People of the Sun from Rage Against the Machine, and the snare sound on there, people, just doing like that little intro. And I remember hearing like that sound and that tone, but then I heard that on other records like that I would listen to, and I'd be like, dude, that snare sounds like that snare. Well, years and years later, I go to find out that obviously before the days of trigger software, he had samples that he would use and go and hand play samples. And so, listen, it's an important thing, and it's a modern concept. Or it seems like a modern concept, excuse me, but it's really something that engineers have been doing since the early 90s. I mean, who knows? It could have been even earlier than that, but that was the first time that I noted it. But, so anyway, we have to go through this and figure out what works and what doesn't. That's why I like using a lot of these presets in here, is because you can sort of fly through them really fast and just listen. Okay, yes, no. Okay, that sounds good. And, you move on.
To the past game.
So too much room. So I'm going to bring these faders down. You can also mute them. It's no different than your DAW, solo, mute, flip the phase, all that stuff. So I want to just hear what it sounds like with the kick in, the kick out, the sub, and the overheads. All right, so I dipped out a little bit of the sub here. I took out room A using a little bit of room B, and I dipped out all of the effects. Let's see how this sits now. It sounded a little woofy to me and a little muddy, so that's why I dipped out some of the sub, and it was definitely too lively, so hence killing this one room. Let's see how she goes now.
We bent and we tried till the past came around. Beating hearts in different rhythm makes such a terrible sound. Don't know a thing, and we've been here waiting for such a long time, and I can't help but feeling for what's on your mind. Watching you pull, but I don't wanna be.
It's not bad. I'm going to check something else out. So if we want to do that, we just right click. You want to clear the slot? Yes, we do. So we just go through and do that, and everything will get reset very quickly. And it's as easy as that. So as I was saying, we've got plenty of presets here on deck. So if we come to, there is a CLA kit preset right here, and we've got some kicks. So we can fire through 13 presets pretty fast. I know that I like the CLA Rock Kick 2 a lot, so if I just double click on that guy, they'll all load up at the bottom, and then they're already kind of like pre-mixed. They're tweaked. I would imagine that Chris did this, and this is some sounds that he likes. I like that one. Let's try a different one. Just randomly pick kick 10. Now you can see it changes out some of the drums in here. Let's try another one. Another one. That one's a little bit tubby for me. Let's check out some of that sound. I was in the Paul Mayberry kit, so let's try some of the Paul Mayberry. Let's see if there are any presets we could hit up in here. Kicks, and not seeing any. Just to clear it out, I figured we could do. Here we go, presets. This is the new the new Sterloid pack from That Sound, which is really cool. Obviously, you can use this in a bunch of different applications here. So we're going to do the trigger drop down, trigger presets, kick presets. And we'll just try this, see how that sounds. So as you can see, this is like kind of a process, guys. You know, it takes a while for me to dial in like my kick sounds and my snare sounds. Again, I have things that I favor for certain genres over others. But look, if you guys are new to using samples or you haven't really, you know, used Trigger before, pick up Trigger. Trigger Platinum's very affordable. Like it's like $100 or $150, and you get a lot of sounds with it. So then what you do is just use those sounds, get familiar with those sounds. So then that way, when you're mixing, for example, a pop rock tune, or you're mixing an R&B song, or you're mixing a hard rock song, you're gonna have certain go-to things that you just know are going to work. All right, right away, I know I don't like it. That's the beauty of presets, is you can just tell. You can be like, nope, that's not going to work in this session. And it's easy. So we'll clear these out. I'm going to come to some stuff that I know I've used before. I'm a big fan of the Near Z and the Jeff Giuliano pack. So we're going to come to kicks here. We're going to listen to some of these kicks. Let's try Rock God. All right, I dig that. We're gonna go 10B. Now these are velocities on here, so what's cool is that they have different velocity hits. You're gonna see that velocity 1 is a lot softer from 10, right? Pretty big difference, pretty cool. So we're using 10B. We'll just throw them all in there. 10B. Overheads. Room 1. And room 2. That's a nice big room, huh? Man, that's massive, huh? So we're gonna have to blend. We're gonna have to definitely blend this in here, because it's a whole lot. Let's turn these guys down. I'm going to turn this our output volume down here just because it's a little loud. I apologize for the glitches, but for some reason, Trigger tends to spike out the performance meter in Studio One here sometimes. It does that in Pro Tools too. It's just part and parcel of using it. So if you guys hear like little glitches or artifacts, it's just when you actually have it open, it will get glitchy sometimes. But if you close it, it'll work smoother. It's just one of those things. Give them the top. And see, sometimes you can actually solo one sample and it can do the lifting of 5 or 8. Right now I've soloed this Rock God Big. And it just kind of has, I think the Big on here has a nice blend of all of them. So I always go through and I blend them to taste, but right now I can technically use one. And that seems to be doing a pretty darn good job if I unsolo it. All right, so the natural here is a little tubby sounding to me. Check it out. And this is part of the fun of using samples. Is sometimes it's fun to like sit down and take a little bit of time, go through your sample library. Maybe you'll find something you haven't heard before. Excuse me, not seen. Weird. That does sound good. Okay. So that's a nice blend to me. We're getting a good balance of attack on the beater head, and we're also getting a lot of that size from the kick out mic sound. Getting some of the overheads there, and we're getting a little bit of that room. I'm a fan of that. We're gonna leave that alone. Let's check out the snare.
We bent and we tried till the past came around. Beating hearts in different rhythm makes such a terrible sound. Don't know a thing.
This is still sounding a little tubby to me on the kick. You know, and this is part of what... Okay, so it's easy to throw samples up in a trigger and just use stuff, right? Like, yeah, you can make your drum kit sound huge and big, but there's an art form, in my opinion, to being able to take samples and to apply them and then to tweak them where they really sound like a part of the drum kit. Like they don't stick out like a sore thumb. And what I mean is like, you know, sometimes you hear a drum kit on a record or on the radio and you're like, oh man, that's a sample. Like boom, you just know it is. The top cats who mix really, I think, are good at sort of disguising it and folding it under and blending it in and choosing the appropriate samples to really, you know, sort of what we want to do is reflect on the tone of the kit, not reflect on the tone of the sample. The sample is meant to enhance the drum kit. It's not the other way around. The drum kit's not meant to enhance the sample. So, you know, just keep that in mind when you are choosing and EQing and compressing your samples. All right, so I had a quick run through my library, and I have settled on 3 completely different samples here to comprise the kick sound that I feel like sort of flatters the acoustic drums. Let me play this for you in context. You see how it kind of sounds like the already, you know, already set up natural kicks? That's the kick in and the kick out. Here is the kick trig. Now, by itself in solo, it doesn't really sound that, you know, mind-blowingly amazing, but a lot of the times that's just what you need in order to, as I was saying, to enhance the acoustic tonality of the kit. So it just worked. I am using, I'll bring this up a little bit. I stuck with the Rock God Big. Okay, so you can hear that there. But then I chose, there was a cool sample called Pop Attack, where we're getting a whole lot of that. It almost sounds like a combination between a kick in mic on, you know, on the beater head and, you know, maybe something a little bit electronic there. But what this ensures is that we can get the attack and the click from the beater, which is going to really cut through. And then this classic 60s kick gives us a little bit of weight, right? So if I solo this up. So that gives us that kick out mic sound. So that's giving us a little bit of the weight, you know, some of that, I don't want to say thump. I hate these words, you know, like all these buzzwords like fat, warm, bright. You guys know what I'm saying. And then this gives us our attack. And then this one just is sort of a little bit of both. So the result is when they all come together, and the important thing is how that plays with our acoustic kicks. And you know, the acid test is bringing it in the context and seeing how you can hear the kick specifically in this situation. How does it sit with the other instruments? Can you hear the attack? Can you hear, you know, sort of that thump and that heft?
We bent and we tried till the past came around. Beating hearts in different rhythm makes such a terrible sound. Don't know a thing.
So right now I'm noticing that we're a little attack heavy, so I'm gonna probably bring this down. We'll bring these guys up a little bit, see how this sort of sits.
We bent and we tried till the past came around. Beating hearts in different rhythm makes such a terrible sound. Don't know a thing. And we've been here waiting for such a long time, and I can't help but feeling for what's on your mind.
So let's just say, for argument's sake, this is what we were going to use. So I would come in here and do a little bit of tweaking now. We'd use our trim tool, put the VCC back on. So I like my kicks to be nice and loud. If I need to, you know, limit them, I will do that. I'm sorry, my kick trigger or my snare trigger tracks, we need them to be loud. So, you know, let's just say we wanted to add a little bit more weight on this guy. We could certainly do that. I would grab something like a Neve. Where's my Neve? And we could do the old Neve trick. Putting in the EQ, going to 50 hertz here on the high pass filter, then going to 35 and boosting the 35 hertz on the low shelf just to get a little more weight to it. Off. On. And one of the other frequencies we can take a look at is if we want more attack. I really love 4.8K here. I'm not saying that's what we need, but just to show you, if I were to increase this. That's sort of a magic frequency for bringing out a whole lot of that smack on the beater head, you know? So anyway, let's just quickly finish up with the snare here, and then you guys are, you know, you kind of have the idea of how that works. Let me just make sure I'm not cranking this too much.
We bent and we tried till the past came around. Beating hearts in different rhythm makes such a terrible sound. Don't know a thing. We've been here waiting for such a long time, and
Okay, so this sounds like it's a little loud to me right now. We're gonna bring this down. Now I'm hearing a few things in there that we're just gonna do similarly to that we did with the kick. So if we solo this. So we might have a little too much room. We might have a little, you know, a little too much of this big. Let's bring these down. I really like that room. I just think a little bit of EQ, taking out some of those low mids, is going to do this a world of good. Let's grab our EQ. Yeah, all that. But see, that's okay, because really what these samples are, they're real drums, they're real samples. So you're going to get a lot of the issues that you get with recording drums anyway, low mid buildup, mud, things like that. And that's the beauty of it, is you could tailor these however you want. If you want to thin it out a bit, you want to thicken it up a bit, all that stuff's doable. All right, just for fun, let's see how this sits with everything else. So one thing I'm hearing about the kick is that I'm noticing we're just getting a little bit of woof. I don't know if woofiness is the right word. In my head, I'm thinking of like 20, 30, 40 hertz. I guess that would be a better way to say it. So I'm gonna do a little bit of filtering. Now what this is gonna do is this is gonna just tighten up the bottom end of this kick sample. So all I'm doing there is just listening, and I'm like, okay, when does it start to sound tight enough, and when am I getting rid of all of that, some of those, it just kind of farts out a little bit in the bottom there, and it's not getting tight enough for me there. So I am going up to 65 hertz. Watch what happens when I bypass this. Listen to sort of the subby, real low end, the tubbiness, I guess, of the kick. Listen. So, we kind of might have to do some stages like like that. I mean, we are high passing on the Neve. Right, we are going to 50, but this is a much more gentle slope anyway. I believe that's a 6 dB per octave, as opposed to on here where we're using a 12 dB per octave. So it's stages, right? It's a constant state of massaging, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and we sort of come together and just throwing together two sounds. So look, are those the samples that I would absolutely use for this record if I was mixing it and it was going out to client? I don't know. But look, just very quickly, I wanted to get some good sounding samples, like I said, that really accentuate the way that the actual drum kit sounds, because let's not forget, right, the overheads and the room mics and all that stuff are really giving us the majority of our drum tone from all of this stuff. So we have to remember that. And now, is it a matter of, do I need to compress this now? Do I need to EQ this further? Well, I'm not really sure. I think the next part of this video, part 5, is going to be just kind of cleaning all of this stuff up. For example, I want to just make sure we're filtering out everything on the overheads, on these room mics. We might do a little something, a little sweetening to the overhead room mic. I might put a filter on the samples. We might compress the samples a little bit, but right now, I think that sounds pretty awesome. And you know, they've come a long way from, you know, just the acoustic state of them. So we're gonna just kind of maybe leave off here, and then what we'll do next time, if I feel like we need to compress the samples anymore, we can go forward with that, and we'll just clean up the rest of the tracks. And then next time we could take an A/B comparison snapshot of the way that the drum sounded at the beginning and where we're at right now. So hopefully you guys got something from how I use samples, you know, via trigger on here. Make sure you route them to their own bus, right? There's nothing wrong with EQing and compressing samples, but just make sure you're not doing it 2 or 3 times where you don't need to, and then it's gonna change the sound of the sample. All right, so that's it for me, guys. This has been part 4 of mixing drums from scratch. We took a look at using samples here. If you guys enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share. If you guys are new to Mix Better Now here, make sure you head over to mixbetternow.com and sign up on my email list. When you do so, I will send you my free audio swag bag, which is full of all kinds of goodies. We got free multi-track sessions, including this one. So if you guys liked this, you know, this little video or this series, you can go ahead, download, and mix this very song here. We've also got mix templates, we've got drum samples, we've got Bricasti reverb impulse responses, free plugins, all kinds of good stuff. So make sure you get signed up on the email list and get your audio swag bag. As always, I just want to say thank you for your time. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. I hope you all have an awesome day, and I will catch you guys next time. See ya.